if you can look for a positive on offense, it's certainly that you were in Illinois territory frequently. Frequently.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback. The truth is Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those. You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country.
That means we've got.
And welcome to Juckonbucks College Football Show, coming to you from somewhere else. I said SEC country the other day. My buddy Eric got on and said, yo, if you're in Florida, unless you're in Gainesville, he's from Florida, well, lives in Florida. Unless you're in Gainesville, you're probably in ACC country. The truth is, I'm in Big 12 country. I'm in Orlando, UCF, Big 12 country officially now. Shout out to the Knights. Anyway, guys, I was on yesterday with my buddy Chad on the Best Damn podcast, and I'm going to link that below. We went for an hour. It was a really good conversation. And for some reason, whatever software he uses worked with my connection, as it was able to upload long after our show, like continue to upload. The StreamYard will not do that, which means I am not going to get to record a Friday episode with Chris, which sucks because Chris said something yesterday that I really want to talk about. I think it would be an awesome debate. Fortunately, it's not pertinent to this weekend, so we're going to be able to have that debate. But he said, will Ryan Day get credit for a big win if he beats Indiana? And he believes he deserves it. I think that there's a lot of people that are going to say, no, you don't. It's Indiana. I think a lot of it will be contingent on the line, right? But we'll talk about it. I think that's a really good conversation. Anyway, Tuesday, one of the things that Chad and I discussed, obviously, was Ryan Day's press conference. It was fresh off of that. Now that some time has passed from that Oregon game, it's pretty apparent that the Ohio State fan base, it kind of was right off the rip, but it really is now. The Ohio State fan base's reaction to that loss was starkly different from the pollsters, the national media, even national college football fans in general. Many Ohio State fans, to a certain degree, were much more negative than the rest of them, mostly because of the defensive performance and how they feel that projects moving forward. And yesterday, Chad and I brought up that one of the reasons I love college football is college football fan bases. And we were specifically talking about the Oregon fan base in that instance. But one of the things that Ohio State has as a fan base, we all got our own little idiosyncrasies. And I think that Ohio State fans are naturally very defensive. And I think that we're very defensive because we are consistently in big games. And when you're consistently in big games, you're going to lose several. And when we lose them, everybody sees it. Everybody knows about it. And we take a lot of crap for it, particularly the SEC record. And when it's one of those, you're frauds, blah, blah, blah. So naturally very defensive. And I think there was a lot of preemptive defensiveness with the loss to the Oregon game before we even saw the reaction. But anyway, just an observation. If you want to watch that show, I will link it again at the bottom. The Best Damn Podcast. Those are my buddies. They do a really good job over there. Anyway, what came from the national media, the rest of college football after that game, was more of a pat on the back for the Buckeyes. And that was pretty cool. And again, we talked about it last week, but if we look at the preseason polls or the preseason odds for the national championship, after Texas's loss last week to Georgia, we are now right back to where we started with Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon in that order, a little over halfway through the season, which is amazing. Also, the fact that we are halfway through the season already is both, it makes me sad and it's really exciting because we're really getting into the meat and potatoes. Really exciting stuff coming up here. But after the, what was it? I don't know, maybe Sunday or Monday on the Pat McAfee show, Nick Saban came out, and if you didn't see his comments, he said, well, here's what he said. And that confirmed to a lot of Buckeye fans what they were already thinking and saying. When you hear Nick Saban come out and kind of reiterate what you've been saying, it certainly gives you a little a little more chest pounding, like, see, that's what I've been saying. And you got a whole lot of that. So Ryan Day was asked about this in the press conference, which obviously that's like, man, that's got to sting. That's got to sting to be asked that, just to hear Lou or him say that. But remember, he really took what Lou Holtz said to heart. Hearing that come from Nick Saban, I'm sure he definitely heard, and we'll get to his response in a little bit. But Ryan Day talked about that pressure, and I want to talk about what he said, because I've heard intelligent people come out listening to what Ryan Day said with two very different viewpoints as to what he said he was going to do moving forward. But there's no doubt in my mind that what he does moving forward in this specific area is going to determine whether or not these Buckeyes can win the national championship. This right here. I think that he's holding the cards. The cards are the talent that he's got on the team. However he plays them when it comes to the pass rush is going to be the determining factor in what they can do. So what did he say on Tuesday? Let's go through it. The first time he's spoken since 10 minutes after the Oregon game for 7 minutes in a tent with screaming fans all around. We had been getting the assistant coaches every week during the game last year. This year they went to one coordinator a week, and they were alternating. And they had the week off last week. They chose to take the week off again this week. And instead they sent the 22-year-old quarterback to stand up there and be the leader of men and field the inevitable questions about the Oregon loss. I don't like that one bit. I'm sure if you're someone who listens to me, you already know I don't like that, so I'm not going to elaborate on it anymore. Nonetheless, Will Howard was an absolute stud. Kudos to him. His leadership has been tremendous this year, more than I think I even imagined it would be, and I thought he was going to be a great leader. He's been fantastic. We're lucky to have him, and he was excellent at that press conference yesterday. But on to what Ryan Day said. He did confirm, obviously, as we know, Josh Simmons is out for the year, and that Zen Michalski will be the first man up to take his spot at left tackle. This Saturday against Nebraska, this is what I'm keying in on for sure. I think that this could potentially make or break the season right here. Depending on how he does, actually, regardless of how he does, we know that the following game against Penn State, they're going to be coming for him, and him specifically. And I'm excited for him. I think he's a really cool kid. He's got a great personality. And if you didn't know, him and Donovan Jackson have been doing food reviews for a while. I watched a couple of them over the summer. So
keep the good vibes going. I'm going to have to go 10. There's too much variety, too many good things on this menu. Customer service was amazing. Everyone here is nice. The desserts were amazing. And overall, 10 out of 10 experience.
Is this going to be a perfect score?
Wait, Tyler.
Whoa.
Whoa. Wait, no.
I'm going to have to give this a 10 out of 10.
Oh my gosh!
Playing right next to Donovan Jackson, they're obviously great friends. I think that's a big plus right there. I do see a lot of Buckeye fans saying it's not really that big of a deal because Chip can scheme around it. And you can to a certain extent, but every time you are scheming around something, you're altering what you want to do. You're also usually giving up a little bit over here to scheme around something over here. If you're sending a tight end to Chip when you otherwise wouldn't, or if you are avoiding this side, going to that side, now you're getting into, okay, now Fryer is tackle 1A. He's the one you were avoiding. This was also your sweet spot on the line between Donovan to run the ball and Simmons. Now you're trying to avoid that. So you lose a ton, and you're always going to lose a ton on a team when you are now missing a first or second round draft pick. But when you go from first or second round draft pick to Zen Michalski at a position as important as left tackle, you're losing a ton. There's no way around it. There's no amount of scheming you can get around to. Zen Michalski's now got to stand up in pass rush against Georgia if you potentially get that far. No way around how big that is. And we saw how Georgia did, that defensive line in particular, against Texas, the best offensive line in football in many people's opinions. The plus here for Ohio State, Will Howard, who sometimes looks like a magician with pass rush pressure coming. So This has definitely put the Buckeyes in a bind, but will puts them in better position than they otherwise would have been last year, for instance. Ryan Day said that Quinshon Judkins' hand procedure will not cause him to miss any time. That's excellent news if true. He's listed day-to-day. And obviously, if you're Ryan Day, you want your opponent to prepare for all of your weapons. So if Quinshon was not going to play against Nebraska, you probably wouldn't say it on Tuesday. My gut feeling is Quinshon doesn't play against Nebraska based on the procedure. But Quinshon is a mutant, and, who knows? Now that we've seen Nebraska kind of get exposed last week against Indiana, and shame on Indiana for ruining some of the juice for this Nebraska game. Remember, we thought there was a chance they could come in 7-0. They lost to Illinois in overtime. Had they beaten Indiana, this would have been a huge game still. They didn't, so it's not a huge game. The Bucks are a 24.5-point favorite. Nebraska, a good football team, but the Buckeyes should be able to beat them pretty easily, which means when it comes to running back and it comes to Quinshon, I kind of hope that he doesn't play much if he does play, and that we get to see James Peoples in some consequential action, because we've not really gotten to see him in some consequential action, and we certainly want him to get that this year, as next year he's going to be, 1A or 1B. I think the odds are that there's going to be an attempt to bring in a starting caliber running back to pair with James Peoples, but a lot of that is going to be dependent on, number one, what's out there in the running back market in the transfer portal, and number two, how high that priority is on your list of transfers, because next season, remember, we lose a ton, and there's going to be a lot of guys you're going to be bringing in the transfer portal. It's not going to be a 7 or 8 man transfer portal class. I think we're going to see quite a few more coming in. And on your list of priorities, I don't know how high they're going to have running back. I doubt too incredibly high. I think regardless, you bring in somebody. I just don't know if it's going to be somebody who's going to be starting caliber, or somebody who's going to be able to hold off Isaiah West and Bo Jackson coming in as freshmen, but both very mature freshmen, both physically mature freshmen. If I had my money, I would say that this is going to end up being James Peoples and Isaiah West as your biggest 1-2 punch next year. I think that everything that Isaiah West brings is exactly what Coach Locke loves in a running back, and I think that he's just a little more ready. Doesn't have the breakaway speed that Bo has, but he's incredibly physical. He's strong as most college seniors already, and he's just really mature. So that's my bet. But nonetheless, I do want to see James Peoples. Coach Day, discussing Quinshon's hands, said that it had nothing to do with him getting the ball ripped out of his hands by Derek Harmon, and he said that with certainty. Of course, I don't think you could really know that with any certainty. Obviously, Quinshon probably told him that, but we're talking about a guy who has not fumbled in 2 years, who's pound for pound maybe one of the strongest players in college football, and the way that play went down makes me feel like potentially it had something to do with a weak hand. I'm not faulting him for that. I'm not faulting the coaching staff for playing him based on how we know these things usually go. They likely knew that he was going to need a procedure. He likely got cleared by medical that he wouldn't do any more damage if he played. And he likely said, I'm playing, it's Oregon. And we'd have played him too. Just a stroke of bad luck the way that went down, in my opinion. As for other injuries, he said he was not going to discuss them. Rumors, of course, that Lathan Ransom hurt himself in practice this week. I heard last week that Lathan Ransom was in a boot before the Oregon game. When Lathan played, I thought that was just bad information. Now that we have a lot more smoke about a Lathan foot injury, I think he played in the Oregon game injured. And I think that the source I heard that from was right all along, which leads me to believe that that had something to do with maybe his less than normal performance. He wasn't that good. He wasn't himself. So the odds are Lathan definitely going to miss some time here. Day obviously wouldn't discuss the injury. So Dan Hope from 11 Warriors cleverly asked him who would be next up at safety. And Day said Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford, which, man, I want to see more Jalen McClain. That kid is a stud. But he also said there'd be some flexibility with Jordan Hancock and Lorenzo Styles, we talked about what I think the plan is going to be moving forward, and that is Jordan Hancock filling in for Lathan Ransom and bringing in either Jermaine Matthews or Lorenzo Styles at nickel. I think that's the most likely thing we're going to see happen against Nebraska. Now, Jermaine, obviously a great corner. His future is at corner. Is he better to put in this situation than Lorenzo? Certainly for coverage, but when it comes to the physical tackling aspect that you need at nickel, which Jordan Hancock is so good at it, Lorenzo Styles is my guy in that scenario between the two of them. Jermaine, awesome coverage guy, can really make tackles out in space, but you need physicality down there. Hancock plays like a linebacker a lot of times. I don't see Jermaine being suited for that, but we'll see what they do. I'd like to see a little bit of both of them. Ryan Day discussed the final play of the game, sent it into the Big Ten for review. It's not a play I've harped on, but, they're right. The clock's supposed to stop when you begin your slide. The problem is this has always been kind of a gray area ever since they implemented that rule for safety purposes, because they don't do it consistently. When a quarterback begins his slide, first off, you can judge what beginning your slide is in a lot of different ways. Second, you can eat up like 4 yards from the point where you technically begin your slide to the end, and they never even spot the ball consistently with this. Sometimes it's in the middle of where his slide was, sometimes at the end, sometimes at the beginning, which means if you're the quarterback, you got to make damn sure there's no doubt. Now, I think Will got down in time. Will thinks so too, and Will thinks that they didn't want to clear the field and look at it upstairs, which, let's be honest, if the game were at home and fans didn't storm the field, I think they probably do take a second look at that up in the booth, and we might have been able to see a 45-yard attempt, which is what it would have been. And, at that point, who knows? You had made a 40-yarder, but huge pressure situation. Nonetheless, Ryan Day and Brandon Inniss, of all the people on the field, were calling timeout. And I think that we should definitely give Brandon Inniss, as an underclassman in a chaotic situation, a whole lot of credit for being the one out there heady enough to call that timeout. I think that's awesome. I think it says a ton about him as a football player. The dude's great. I wish we could see some more of him. Circumstances, he's just not playing a ton. Awesome athlete, awesome teammate. Everybody loves him. They voted him for the leadership council on the team as a second-year guy. He's just great. So props to him for being the one to call that timeout. Of course, we know the Big Ten said there was no time left. Asked about tight end Will Kazmarek being out for a while. He said, yes, he's going to be out for a while. I think it's a broken collarbone, not a broken arm. Ryan Day said that Jelani Thurman and Bennett Christian are going to have to... Is it Bennett Christian are going to have to step up? How many times have you said Bennett Christian or Christian Bennett? I've mixed it up every time I've ever said it. He patted Keenan Bailey on the back for the depth in the tight end room. Now, personally, I don't feel you're losing much from Will Kazmarek to Bennett Christian. And I think you could gain a ton if Jelani Thurman would ever get it together. We know Jelani Thurman played 20 snaps for the first 3 games and then essentially dropped off the face of the earth for the last 3 games. He played good as the other tight ends in those 3 games. So that tells us either they are holding him back just to be jerks, or he's not doing what he needs to do Sunday through Friday. I'm putting my money on that. And that sucks because he's a guy who could make a difference. I hope that at some point this season we see him earn some more minutes back. Hopefully it's right now with the opportunity with Will Kazmarek out. Super serious Ryan Day was asked about whether or not they need to do a better job with deep balls, and he said, yes, we do. We'll be launching some today. And everybody laughed. Ryan didn't laugh. I mean, you want to talk about demeanor, man. If looks could kill. He is very serious, and obviously he knows that's what he should be projecting in this moment, and he's a sharp dude. Whether or not he is this serious, I think he is. This is a tightly wound guy, and this is part of the conversation that I want to have here, I think tomorrow, but this is something I've been working on all week. So I'm of the belief that the Ohio State coaching job is one of one. It is totally unique in the country. And I think that what we're seeing with Ryan Day, and a guy that's incredibly successful, and you've got a lot of the fan base that wants him gone, and a lot of the fan base looking at the other side saying, are you people crazy? And I think that is incredibly unique to this specific job. And I want to get into all the reasons why that is. And both the pros and cons of moving on from a coach, not him specifically, but just a coach in this scenario, and the cautionary tales, because they are aplenty. You know, Ohio State is not guaranteed to have a floor of 10-2, despite what some people think. So it's a conversation I've just been stewing on as I've been, lounging at the pool with Diet Pepsis this week. And I do want to have that conversation at some point. But Ryan Day said that Will Howard's comments after the game, when Will said he hopes that this will light a fire under us, were taken out of context. And he wanted to make it clear for the second time now that this is not something that caught them by surprise. They did not take their opponent lightly. They've been going 1,000 miles an hour at the facility, and they were 100% prepared. They just lost the game. And I like this. I like this because, to be quite honest, if I heard him saying something like, this is going to, like what Will said, light a fire under, I'd be pissed. Because that to me would sound like, are you saying you weren't ready? That all this building up to that game didn't have you ready for that? For that game? That would be unacceptable. So I'm happy that he's taken this tact. He clearly knows that that's the wrong thing to say. Asked about the Denzel Burke situation. He said that they had the conversation. He said those conversations happen, but we believe in Denzel. I've kind of lightened up on this because it's like, I can sit on my couch and say, you got to pull Denzel. You have to pull Denzel. Then it happens again. You have to pull Denzel. And I can say that all I want. Jermaine Matthews is obviously, a great cover corner. But hindsight's 20/20. Denzel was probably telling them on the sideline between series, like, I'm cool, I got it. And as a coach, the best coaches know some players you need to kick in the butt. Some players you need to pat on the back. We don't know the dynamics. There's a potential, if you play that the wrong way, you shut him down. And they didn't know that the next time out there, he was going to bite on a double move and get burned. They didn't know that. So while it was easy for me to sit on the couch and criticize them not pulling him, until you know the dynamics, it's tough to say that. It's a sticky situation. Ultimately, yes, I think they should have pulled him, but we know what happened the next series and the next series now. They didn't pull him. It is what it is. Also, no guarantee that Jermaine Matthews wouldn't have screwed up either. Let's be honest. All right, let's get to the juicy juice. And, I didn't think anybody would have the stones to ask it because Dylan Davis is in Boston. Shout out Dylan. No episode with me and Dylan this week. So Dylan wasn't in attendance, and Dylan has got the stones, man. Dylan will ask whatever. But Ryan Day was asked about the Nick Saban comments. And if you hadn't heard the Nick Saban comments, here they are.
We talk about these teams that have the number one defense in the country. They're the number one scoring defense. But who did they play to come up with those stats?
Who they beat?
And then they play somebody really good, and they sort of get, exposed a little bit. And you start to wonder, exactly how good are they, especially when they play somebody good, because that's when it counts. And in college football, I think that the rules favor the offense. Being able to block down the field, throw RPOs, throw advantage throws, throw screens and block people and crack people. I mean, it's tough to play as good a defense now as you used to and be able to win the game on defense. So I was really impressed with Oregon, the way they played on defense against a great Ohio State offensive team with a lot of weapons. And then the way that Oregon just, sort of picked Ohio State apart. They didn't affect the quarterback in any way. And
he had time.
And he had time, but they didn't ever pressure.
Yeah,
I mean, it was just four guys rush, which, that's kind of an antiquated way to play defense. And I'm not being critical of somebody's philosophy at Ohio State, but.
So, that's absolutely got to sting a ton to hear Nick Saban say that. We remember how much the Lou Holtz comments irritated Ryan Day. And the coaching fraternity is very small, and I'm positive that Nick Saban dislikes saying something like that. He doesn't want to put somebody on blast like that because he knows his words carry a ton of weight, and he knows that coach is going to get asked about what Nick Saban said about him. So he certainly didn't want to say that. Shout out to him for doing a good job and just, calling it like he sees it. But Ryan's answer...
Well, when it doesn't work, it's accurate. Yeah.
So were the comments accurate? If it doesn't work, it's accurate. Ryan's always good about accepting responsibility, taking culpability, but something either is antiquated or it is not. Now, something antiquated can still work from time to time, but it either is or it isn't, and it clearly is. And he knows it's not working.
It's not working. So there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Funny you say that, Ryan. There are a lot of different ways to get that done.
There's so much four-man rush simulated pressure, still able to play the coverages that you play, drop different people, rush somebody that is supposed to be dropping, drop somebody that's supposed to be rushing. And these things are ways to get pressure without giving up anything.
Yeah.
And coverage. And, I think in this day and age of football, you got to go down that road a little bit or you're going to be behind the eight ball.
Funny enough, the things that he's talking about, Saban in that clip, are literally some of the things that Ohio State was doing during the Oregon game. Remember the picture that went around with the 4 defensive linemen drop back and Sonny and Cody rushing with man coverage in the back? Literally, that right there, some of the stuff that Nick Saban's describing in that little segment. But when Jim Knowles did it, everybody roasted him and went, what the heck is this? So we can't have it both ways. Either you want him to try stuff like that and get exotic. I wasn't happy with that particular concept that they were running. Not my favorite, but I was happy that they were trying something. But you can't have it both ways. You want them to do it or you don't. We don't get to pick and choose which thing they're going to run. But I do want them to try different things to get that pressure. And that right there didn't work because of the execution. Those defensive linemen need to engage to make those offensive linemen get them so that Sonny and Cody, one of them, can get through. They didn't. They stepped up and they pulled it back immediately, which gave those offensive linemen time to guard or to step in front of Cody and Sonny. Otherwise, that could have very well worked and not resulted in the play that it resulted. That was a failure of coaching and or execution by the defensive line, yet again. But there's definitely a benefit to being a defensive line that doesn't need to do anything, that can just have the dudes to line up and whip your dudes, whether you know what's coming or not. It's simple. It's easy. It's the product of recruiting monsters and those monsters performing. Jack, JT, TNT in the middle. You don't need to get fancy. Just going to straight up whip you. And it works sometimes. And when it's working, it's great. But when it's not working, you have got to have a backup plan. You can't just shrug your shoulders and say, well, Oregon's got a good O-line with 2 NFL tackles. Guess that's it. This is how it's going to be. And that's the way it felt in that game. And that is why I think everybody was so irritated. They don't even run basic stunts you see in freshman high school football. Now, I referenced the Georgia game against Texas. If you watch that game, it was a masterclass on the defensive line. Absolute masterclass. And another reason why I think Glenn Schumann would be in my top 3 candidates if Ohio State was to move on from the head coach regime. This is one thing that's still separating Georgia from Ohio State. And it's not the talent. A little bit. But I spent the offseason saying Ohio State has finally got the talent on the defensive line and the depth. The depth and the talent at the starting defensive line that has been the difference between Ohio State and the top tier SEC team of the year, whatever that one is, whether it's Florida, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Alabama, whoever that top team is that year, This year, Ohio State matches it on the defensive line, and they do. They got the athletes to do it. But Georgia is doing what you need to do with that talent, and Ohio State isn't. They're running all sorts of stunts, setting up pressure all different ways. They're shifting pre-snap. The line's shifting. I mean, they're just 3-man fronts, 4-man fronts. And when you watch it, it just makes you sad, man. It just made me sad because Ohio State has so many dynamic athletes in that front seven. They could do all of that. They could do it all, and it would be menacing. And Georgia beat the number 1 team specifically because of that. And that's what I thought we would see this year out of Ohio State. We are not yet. Are Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson on the same page? Now, this has been the talk of the in-tune Buckeye fan for a while, a couple of years, but it's really, really coming to a head now. And a lot of people think that it's finally been addressed. We'll see. But I've got questions about Ryan Day's answers here. So, for one, he says, yes, they're on the same page. Then when he goes on as to what they're going to do moving forward, I hear a couple of things here. And I've seen very intelligent people come out with different takes on what they hear they're going to do moving forward.
If you look at, and I know the job of any coordinator is just to sort of take the talent on hand and put those guys into the best position that you're saying. Right. If you look at what Jim did at Oklahoma State and what he's doing now, it does look quite different in terms of like structure and fronts and all those things. What were the conversations like when you hired him about like, hey man, do your stuff? Or was it, no, we have our players here work around what we have on hand?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Yeah, I mean, my goal, bringing Jim in was to be the head coach of the defense and to run it. But there was also, we have, recruited very well in the defensive line. So, when he was at Oklahoma State, they didn't have, 4 down D linemen and then certainly no depth behind it. So, he had to be creative about what he was doing there. Decision was made a long time ago that, we have the D linemen here at Ohio State that can play with 4 down linemen. Now, might we consider some different fronts and changing that up? I think it's all very good conversation. And we have to make sure that, we're going down all those roads to make sure that we're putting these guys in a chance to be successful. We're making it, not easy for the offense to just, line up and know where we're coming from. So, but I think at the end of the day, to answer your question, it comes down to the personnel you have and where you are and to put them in a chance to be successful. And, I feel like, we have plenty of D linemen here and we have the right guys on the field. But we got to make sure that, we are changing it up and making sure that, it isn't just, a 4-man rush straight all the time.
So when it comes to specifically the 4-man front, I come away thinking nothing is changing there at all. He says, we made the decision a long time ago to play 4 down linemen. We might consider some different fronts and mixing it up. It's all good conversation. Then he says, you got to rely on your personnel. We have plenty of D linemen. And to this point, that sounds to me like they're not changing the front. It's 4 down linemen. Now, doesn't mean they're not going to change anything because he does end it by saying, we got to make sure it's just not a 4-man rush all the time. That does not say anything specific to me to the 4-man front. That's just talking about a 4-man rush. So a lot of people came out of this thinking, okay, we're going to see 3-man fronts, linebackers rushing. That's not what I heard. I don't know what you heard. Now, when you are specifically sticking with that 4-man front, you're limiting what you can do, which I don't like hearing. I don't like hearing that. It also goes back to kind of what we were talking about with that Larry, with that Jim Knowles rift. I mean, it wasn't not really a rift, but just doing what Larry wants to do, which is the 4-man. And it sounds like Ryan just agrees with the 4-man front. So either he really sincerely agrees with that or Larry's just getting his way. It's one or the other. I would lean towards at this point, Ryan just agrees with it. He just wants to run the 4-man front. That's what he thinks is the best way to go about it. I think what you're doing is you're pigeonholing yourself. And you should always be as multiple as you can be if you have the athletes to do it and the coaches who can coach it. We know that we have the coach that can coach it because that's what Jim Knowles coached prior to coming here and was good at it. And we know for sure that we have the athletes to do it. So, I think that might be a mistake. But, it's Ryan Day's defense. Ultimately, he's now involved with the defense. And it's his team. This is the national championship on the line. Right here, this area of this team, right here to me, is everything. Because, again, we just saw Georgia beat the team that was number 1 in the country based on this. The offense sucked. Carson Beck sucked. It was their defensive line. It was the pressure that they caused. And Ohio State has been lackluster at it. They've got to get better. So let's see what he does. I can't wait to see. Now, I am choosing to go into this optimistically that we are going to see some changes. We're going to see a lot of variety. And we are not just going to see the same old thing they've been doing. And I'm not going to put all my weight on what we see against Nebraska, because if they are, now they've had 2 weeks now in between Oregon and Nebraska. If they are really going to add some things, if we're going to see a lot of multiple looks, if we're going to see some stunts, some things that we've been wanting to see, we're not going to see it against Nebraska, maybe a little bit. We're going to see it at Penn State. Penn State, obviously, it's all the bullets out of the chamber, right? Top 5 matchup in Happy Valley. You're not holding anything back for that one. So if we go to Penn State, and I think that'll just tell the story, right? That'll tell the story of what we're going to see moving forward. But I'm going to choose to be positive about it and say that we are going to see not just a stagnant defensive 4-man front, cage rushing. We're going to see some action. We're going to see some fun. We're going to see some pressure on Drew Aller. I can't wait for that Penn State game. I know we got the Nebraska game. I just honestly don't think Nebraska offers much of a challenge for this Buckeyes team, especially after last week. All right, friends. Well, that segment went a little longer than I thought it would. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to roll into tomorrow with Nebraska, with the picks of the week, along with the slate and all the games that are of consequence that we need to be looking out for, the ones that I'm excited for, though I will miss a chunk of those games because I'll be traveling home, which also is going to mean that the Buckeye postgame show is not going to be directly after the game. We're either going to do it before the 7:30 games, or maybe after, or maybe even just Sunday morning. We might end up doing that, but I think we will come on regardless after the late games. So like 11:30, come on after those games, just because I need my fix of the live show. I can't believe I ever did it like this so long, just me and a camera lens. I'm kind of lonely, to be honest. I miss the interaction, which is kind of why I got into this. So we do have another piece of news, though, and I said for really since the Iowa game, let's go back to the Iowa game. So Naeem Offord was going to come up for Iowa, and at that point, we found out that they were not going to be coming up for the Iowa game because Kaori Offord, his older brother who plays for Tulane, was going to be playing at UAB. So the family was going to be staying at home to watch Kaori. And they were going to come to the Nebraska game. Okay, cool. And I said, I'm thinking if they don't come to Nebraska, I'm probably going to feel like this is about a coin flip. Things aren't going good. And we found out today, not coming to the Nebraska game. So, a couple schools of thought here. You could choose to look at this pessimistically. And, you can't say it has anything to do with traveling far. You just went to Oregon. Yeah, the game doesn't have a lot of luster, but, it doesn't look good. You've been other places many more times than Ohio State. Dad just came and said it was a 3-horse race a little while ago between Auburn and Oregon and Ohio State. Also brought up going to Colorado, potentially, and Dion wanting to use him in the Travis Hunter role, which, my goodness, man. More on that in a second. That would be the pessimistic outlook. The optimistic outlook would be like, look, this game was going to be a big game. They clearly look like to go to big games. This one isn't a big game anymore. Buckeyes are a 24-point favorite. it looked like for a while there, Nebraska might come in here at 6-1, having just lost that one game to Illinois, ranked Illinois by a couple of points. And that would be a night game, a high-profile game. Well, now it's a noon game. You're coming from Alabama. That right there causes conflict when you got a Friday night football game. So, it's not lined up to be the biggest game. And wants to go to the Michigan game, which also keeps you away from the Iron Bowl, which that really doesn't mean a ton to me. But if you're looking at it from the optimistic way, you could say all that stuff. So, bottom line, Coach Walt was just down there last week. Got a great relationship with Coach Walt. There's no doubt in my mind that Naeem's best relationship with any coach is with Tim Walton. Now, that's just one piece of it. You still could lose this recruitment. You still could have a flip. And Oregon certainly is the biggest threat here, and they're coming really hard. So it's dangerous when they're involved. It's dangerous when Auburn's involved, and he lives close to Auburn. I still think Oregon's the biggest threat based on what his old man said. However, he's still committed to the Buckeyes. Ultimately, I think this is just going to be one of those that, we're not going to feel at ease until signing day, no matter what he does. But we can say for sure, if they don't come to the game, like, all right, well, that was fun. Bottom line is, this staff needs to be out. I'm sure they are already. They were trying to get a third corner in the class, but, they got to be really swinging. And I certainly hope that they're trying to get back with Brandon Finney, who word came out this week was potentially flipping from Oregon to Penn State. And the way he committed so quickly when he went out to Oregon to visit them kind of made me feel like that was a bit of a hasty decision. He's since gotten his 5th star. He was Ohio State's backup plan for Dorian Brew. Now they're both 5 stars. So Brandon Finney, if you don't get Naeem, he would certainly be an excellent piece to add to the puzzle. But back to Naeem. Deion talking about wanting to use him in the Travis Hunter role, and you could certainly say Deion saying that to kids to really entice them. Naeem Offord's senior film is so much better even than his junior film. I mean, this dude is just, he's next level athlete. He is not, before I thought, all right, if you lose Naeem Offord out of the class, it's a cornerback. You still got Devin Sanchez, the number one most prototypical corner maybe I've ever seen coming out of high school. Guy could start day one at any program in the country, including Ohio State or LSU. Cornerback U, right? DBU. Just the absolute prototype. He's perfect. Naeem Offord, on the other hand, not your perfect prototype corner. A couple inches shorter, not as long. But when you just talk about football player, he's got it all. Unbelievably smooth athlete, natural instincts, crazy explosive. He's just always in the right spot. He's so fast. He floats, cuts great, shifty, quick. He's got it all, man. He's got it all. He is an impact player, and I could totally see him in that Travis Hunter role. 100%. So it'd be a big loss. It'd be a real big loss. But I talk about positions in the transfer portal and ones that fear me. And really moving forward, the only recruiting positions, positions that the Buckeyes lose out on that are really going to give me anxiety are offensive linemen and defensive linemen. There are other positions that are a little bit tougher than others, but one that's pretty easy, cornerback, another one, wide receiver. You can get really top-notch dudes out of the portal, and they're plentiful at corner and wide receiver. Oregon just built their entire secondary out of the portal in the last couple of years, and it's a good secondary. If you got the money and you need to get it done, you can get it done. So not incredibly concerning when it comes to corner. Nonetheless, an excellent player that I don't think we're going to feel any kind of easiness about until signing day. And that sucks. But it is what it is. Odds are we do see somebody or somebodies flip out of this class. Those are just the odds. There are some people that still think TJ Alford and Jarquez Carter might. I don't believe that for a second. I think those dudes are locked in. London Merritt just took a visit to Colorado. I also don't believe that for a second. But, that's where we're at with this day in recruiting. You just don't know when these guys are taking visits what the motive is behind the visit. You get paid to take visits at some places. If people are desperate, they're going to pay you more. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes with it. So that's the update on Naeem, which is essentially no update on Naeem, except Naeem's not going to be there for Nebraska and says he's going to be there for Michigan. We shall see, my friends. All right. That'll do me for today. I appreciate you so much. Please do subscribe and like the video on your way out. And can't wait to get back home and get back in the regular studio. I feel embarrassed bringing this to you from this shabby, shoddy looking background. It's just deplorable, and I apologize. But thanks for coming. Talk to you later. Juck off. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck? Who is Juck?
Juckonbucks.
Juckonbucks. Juckonbucks?
Juckonbucks.
My guy Juck. Juckonbucks. My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
Juckonbucks. Okay.
Juck is junk.
The Juck eyes. The Juck eyes. Juckonbucks.
Junk. Juck. Not junk. Juck.